I just got back from watching Superman the Christopher Reeve Story, and I'm happy to say this film exceeded my expectation. I know that's a lot to say considering I had high hopes for this documentary, but truthfully, Superman the Christopher Reeve Story is an incredibly heartwarming, awe-inspiring, motivational, and gentle documentary that will leave you inspired. It is a must-watch for everyone, not just Superman fans, not just DC fans, everyone. And I truly mean that. You will walk out of this movie feeling like you have grown as a person because of everything you witnessed throughout this documentary. Yes, it is a very heart-wrenching documentary. It's a sad story, but you will walk away learning not only everything that encapsulated Christopher Reeve's life, not only what his journey looked like to becoming Superman, but everything he learned after his injury. It is an incredibly touching film. It's sad at moments, it's emotionally tense at moments, but at the same time, it's also motivational because you learn about Christopher Reeve's thought process as he created his foundation, as he overcame so many obstacles, as he made so many touchstones in the later half of his life, and you learn everything he ever thought about humanity, hope, and what it meant to be a hero. You start off with the movie teaching you that Christopher Reeve felt like being a hero was someone who did extraordinary things without thinking about the consequences, and you're like, yeah, that checks out considering, if I'm watching this film, odds are I'm a Superman fan or I'm just a comic book fan. And then you end the film hearing an incredibly different take on what a hero is. You learn from Christopher Reeve himself that being a hero no longer, at least to him, is being someone that does extraordinary things without thinking of the consequences. You learn that being a hero is being an ordinary person that overcomes an overwhelming amount of obstacles, and it touches you in a way where you're like, wow, that's just beautiful. And I know I won't do any sort of justice towards that quote because Christopher Reeve says it in such a beautifully touching way, but it touched me in a way where even I reflected at myself as a person and thought about everything that led me to watching this documentary. I'm like, you know what? He's right. And that's not the only thing that touches you throughout this film. You'll learn about how Christopher Reeve feels about the universe. Towards the latter half of the film, Christopher Reeve says something incredibly touching about the universe itself and how we think about the universe. And while I might not do justice to this quote as well, I'd like to point it out because I think it pretty much summarizes this documentary. He says, and I quote, "We often think of the universe as particles colliding against one another, often creating chaos, when in reality, things just happen, and it's our job to understand why they happen." And when he says that quote, that summarized not only the entire film, not only his life, but it just summarizes the human experience in general. And it was just such a beautiful thing to hear, even though it's so simple and so basic. It's just the way he said it was so beautiful and touching. And you walk out of this movie thinking like, I changed as a person for the better because I sat through Superman the Christopher Reeve Story. And as a DC fan, I understand that going into this film, I'm thinking, oh, I can't wait to see what he feels about Superman. And it's kind of a bittersweet lesson to understand that Christopher Reeve ended up talking about how he ended up basically resenting Superman, which is why he ended up taking so many roles that just were the complete opposite of Superman. But I'm happy because I not only got to see the historical side of being Superman, I got to see who he was as a person. And I felt like that was bigger than Superman itself because he encapsulated hope. He encapsulated what it meant to be a good human. He encapsulated what it was to look out for others just because you're a genuine person. Even if it's a masterpiece to some people, even if it's a role that everyone will forever connect him with, I am more happy that I got to learn about his ideologies rather than just sitting through a documentary about this is how Superman was made. This is how Superman got casted. Here's the behind the scenes look, which, yes, there's a lot of that in the film. I'm just happy that this felt like we need to do more than that. We need to touch people's hearts. We need to touch people's souls. And we need to understand and send the message that it's okay to be hopeless. But you have to understand that eventually you have the decision to overcome your hopelessness by trying to push the boundaries and be a hero. And by being a hero, I don't mean being someone that tries to be Iron Man. I'm not saying go out there and make a Spider-Man costume and try to be Spider-Man. I'm just saying that you should be someone that overcomes the overwhelming amount of obstacles that might come your way in life. And that is the most beautiful thing about this film. So if you're looking for something that feels like the perfect introduction to Superman before you watch the movie for the first time, yes, I highly recommend watching this. If you're someone that's looking to learn about one of the more iconic actors of our time, yes, I absolutely recommend it. But if you're someone that is struggling, someone that's looking for motivation, someone that's looking to be touched in a way that you never expected, and someone who wants to learn not only about life itself, but you wanted to grow and understand and learn new ideologies, that's where I recommend Superman the Christopher Reeve Story the most, because that's what you'll get out of this film. I'm incredibly happy, not only as a DC fan, that I got to see this film in theaters, but I'm happy that I, as a person, got to witness this film in theaters, because this is a film that I want to own physically. This is a film I will download digitally whenever we can on storefronts. This is a movie that, according to rumors, it might get a wide release, I would see again. I genuinely think this is one of the most beautiful films I have ever seen. And I know that you might not expect this sort of video to be so serious, so emotional, so touching, but neither did I when it came to this movie. I looked at this as, this is the first DC Studios project. I have to see this. I might not be the biggest Superman fan, but I want to be someone that tries to experience things that are new, things that I might not have experience or knowledge in. And I want to make sure that I not only try everything that comes my way from DC Studios, but I want to make sure I'm able to support it and talk about it for those who might not be able to see these films, those who might not be interested in these sort of films. And Superman, the Christopher Reeve Story, is the most beautiful introduction to what will be DC Studios. It is everything that you want from DC Studios. It shows that they care about the legacy. It shows that they care about the history of DC. And more importantly, it shows that they're not afraid to do something different. And with this documentary, I am happy to say that this is a masterpiece. This is a 5 out of 5. This is everything you could want out of not only a documentary, but a film that encapsulates so many things in such a beautiful way that is not only paced perfectly, but is discussed perfectly. This is the type of film that you want in your life. This is the type of movie that will impact you for years to come. This is the type of movie that you will reflect on, because you are not only taught things about DC's history in general, you are taught things about life, about people, about understanding, and it motivates you to not only want to be a better person, but to also learn more than you actually knew. It makes you want to open your mind and understand that there are things in this world that are bigger than you. And I feel like that's a big thing that Christopher Reeve tried to get across, not only in his life in general, but in the small amount of quotes and insight we got from him in this documentary. It is the most beautiful thing that you could ask for, because if you're a nerd, if you're a comic book fan, this will service you. But if you're just someone that's looking for motivation, if you're someone that's looking for inspiration, if this is where if you're the type of person that genuinely needs some sort of message to help you push through a difficult time, this movie will service all of you. This is a movie that will do justice to all of you. And that's everything I was hoping it would be, and then some. To sum this video up, and to sum my opinion of Superman the Christopher Reeve Story up, I just want to say I am extremely grateful that this got a theatrical release. I am extremely grateful that I went out of my way to go see it. And I'm extremely grateful that Christopher Reeve was such a fantastic human being. And I'm glad that I got to understand why he made his foundation, the thought process behind his foundation, the amount of things he hid from the public so he could try to be the symbol of hope that everyone knew him to be. And I am very thankful that DC Studios let this be the first DC Studios release, because it spoke volumes. And I think more than anything else I have said in this video, I am extremely happy. I am extremely filled with hope. and I am touched in a way that I didn't expect to be touched. And I know I've said those things a lot throughout this review, but I want you all to truly understand Superman, the Christopher Reeve Story, is special. It is everything you could want out of a documentary, because you will walk away feeling like you became a better person. And I feel like that is bigger than everything else in this film. And I feel like that kind of encapsulates Christopher Reeve as a person, because that's how those who were friends with him spoke about him. Everyone in this film talked about how much they impacted him and how much they made him laugh and how much they inspired him and how much they were in awe of him, because he felt like he was such a bigger than life person. And this documentary, I know I keep mixing between documentary and film, felt like it wanted to talk about things that were bigger than life, and it succeeded at that. So if you can't see this film, don't worry. Hopefully one day it'll come to streaming service, and I hope that you could live vicariously through me as someone who makes these sort of reviews and does the job of seeing movies you might not be able to see and discussing them, because I truthfully think that in all of my years of being a comic book fan, outside of Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, which I know is a very cliche movie to bring up as an example, and Blue Beetle, I don't think I've been touched by a comic book related project in this fashion. This eclipses everything I have watched in 2024. This eclipses everything I have seen from comic book media in general over the last several years. Superman, the Christopher Reeve Story, is beautiful, gentle, awe-inspiring, and absolutely fantastic. It is the film of the year for me, and it is something that I will talk about for years to come. I genuinely hope that they release this physically. I genuinely hope they release this widely, and I hope it comes to streaming services, because this is the type of product that people need in their lives. You will find yourself wanting to rewatch this in the moments of your life when things are tough and you need motivation. This is the type of product that you will be able to rely on when you feel like you're losing hope. This is the type of product that you might not expect it, but you need it in your life. And I feel like that is everything you could want out of something like this sort of film. So if you haven't seen it, if you plan on wanting to see it, I want you to know it is worth it. It is worth going out of your way to trying to see it while you can. It is worth hoping it gets released widely, and it's worth hoping that it gets released on streaming services. Superman, the Christopher Reeve Story is the most beautiful DC project that has ever been released, and I don't think anything will top it. And I'm glad that this was something I got to see, because I truly was impacted by this film in a way I didn't expect it. I know I'm someone that likes to make y'all laugh. I know I'm someone that loves to make things not that serious, but when it comes to this film and this documentary, things are that serious, and things are that emotional, and things are that tense. But I'm just glad that I found the effort and the energy to talk about it, because it's one of those things where if you watched it, you would know and understand why my reaction is like this. And I know this review is a little different than how I talk and a little different than the rest of my content, but that's just because that's how much it touched me. That's how much it inspired me. And I didn't want to overdo it in terms of how I discussed this project. It's just one of those things where Superman, the Christopher Reeve Story, is that serious. It is that gentle. It is that inspiring. And it is that focused. And I wanted to try to communicate my feelings about such a serious documentary in the way that I felt it deserved, because I wanted to give it the respect that it deserved. And I'm not doing that because I feel like I have to. I'm doing that because that's just how much it impacted me as a Superman fan, as a DC fan, as someone who just tries to be a good person and tries to be a good entertainer and content creator and, you know, all of those things. But more than I expected, I walked out thinking, wow, that was absolutely beautiful. And I will leave it on that note. Superman, the Christopher Reeve Story is everything I wanted it to be and more. It is the most beautiful thing that I've watched in, I think my entire life. I've watched a lot of movies, I've watched a lot of shows, I've played a ton of video games, I've read a bunch of comic books, I've watched a ton of documentaries. This is my favorite documentary, and I feel like this set the bar in terms of expectations for DC Studios, because if every project feels like it has that amount of love, that amount of effort, that amount of care, I believe DC Studios will be bigger than everyone expects, because this project was something special. I hope everyone understands that Superman, the Christopher Reeve Story, deserves every 10 out of 10, every perfect review, every amount of love, sharing, accepting, and understanding that it's getting, because it truly is that special.